Cool.
Exactly.
So, do you have anything in mind that you want to talk about? Or I have a couple of things for you, but I've done my best.
Why don't you ask what you'd like to ask? And well, first of all, thanks for having me on, Ryan. And I really enjoyed watching the videos I've looked at, and really interesting. So yeah, I think I'd be interested to hear what your questions are. Anyway.
What is everything you know? And also, no. Most of my questions are around John Mitchell. I'm sure it's John Mitchell, and he just wants to sound posh.
I think he is posh. But, I mean, he was.
Yeah, he was. I actually read, so I'd put off reading, I forgot what the book's called now. Oh, no.
Dimensions of Paradise?
That's the one. At least I've got you here. I've literally just finished it 2 days ago, but I did it on audio. So I didn't have the pleasure of any of the diagrams. So I'm like, I'm going to have to buy the book now. But I
find that I have a lot of audiobooks and you don't get the diagrams. And also you miss bits because your mind wanders. And I find you have to listen to the same book at least 3 times to get the whole book.
Yeah. You say mind wanders. I say drift off to sleep.
Yes, if you're lucky.
Yeah, no, I do it lying down. I am lucky. Yeah, I just kind of lie down and try and absorb it as much as I can. I find I get really deeply into it, but when the time comes, I usually nod off to sleep. But I'm putting it on before I go to sleep anyway. So
yeah. No, you're getting something out of it.
Yeah, I mean, those people that say you can learn things in your sleep are completely wrong, though.
Well, you never know. I mean, it sounds like an easy option, so it's worth a try, right? The amount of audiobooks I've listened to in my sleep, you never know. Some of it might be going in.
Yeah, you don't actually know. Yeah. Well, if I start saying some complex numbers that I've never come across before, then we'll know it works. Yeah, so
I don't have my copy handy here. I don't know if I need. Do I need my copy of Dimensions of Paradise?
No, it wouldn't. It's very. If you've seen my stuff, it's very loose. What I go on about. Plus, these are such big, cosmic ideas that we're talking about. It can get quite difficult to parse it correctly. So you're allowed the odd mistake. People get what we're on about in general. So I read the book, and the reason why I hadn't read it before was because my work follows a very similar vein, and I don't want it to inspire me or I always said I'll read it at the end. Now I've nearly finished the book that I'm writing, so okay, this was a good time to read it, especially seeing as I'm talking to you.
And can I ask you what book you're writing?
It's well, I thought it was one book, but it turns out I'm on 150 something thousand words now, so it's 2 books. But I'm going to condense it. It's kind of the summary of everything that I've learned over the last decade, and thankfully summarizing these pillars that I found in a local churchyard that look like they come from a really old Templarish church, or at least somebody that knew all this stuff, and all the diagrams that continue the tradition and tell the tradition. Frankly, they're all tarot, and all the images that you find in tarot are the things that convey all this knowledge that would, all this, all these metrics and all these cosmic time numbers and all this. I would call it Saturnian. So would they. All this Saturnian information.
Right.
How magicians did their stuff, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you've managed to get all the tarot images and symbolism and church symbolism and the pillars all together.
It is, yeah, it's all the same. So how it originally started was that I'd had an accident. I was living off an island off Anglesey, like Holly Island it's called, or Cubby Island, depends what you want to call it. And because I couldn't really go anywhere, I just really got deeply into this subject, more so than I had before. And I was looking for a pattern in tarot. And I just started to do videos on YouTube. And at the end of this one video, I placed, John Michel's pyramid, moon, earth.
7-11. Yeah.
That one. over an image of Sheila in a gig, and I was like, whoa, it fits. I'd just done it to look nice, and I was like, whoa, that fits. And I'm like, hang on a minute, is this the same pattern that I'm looking for in the tarot? And I looked at everything that I'd drawn. I was like, whoa, I have actually drawn lots of 7-sided things, because that pyramid comes from a 7-sided pentagram, as it were, septagram. And yeah, it blossomed from there. The place I was living in Wales, when I did get to go out, I realized this same geometry was everywhere. It was a very Masonic town. It had been a Roman fort, the usual stuff. And then when I got back to the northwest, I found this churchyard with a sator square in it. Do you know a sator square? Sator, Aripo, tenet, opera, rotas. And I was like, I'm here to decode this. And eventually I did decode it. And it was all those cosmic numbers, 432, 21, 25, 9, 20. And I found that also the diagrams on the pillars, which included things like a wheel of fortune, which is the main symbol that conveys all this stuff, when you understand it. Yeah, I found that all the images were drawn with a 7-sided shape, you know, like a septagram, as a pentagram's an exploded pentagon. So then when I put that image over the top, it was the version I discovered is like John Michel's, just more so, a bit more investigated than his, and it's got a few more lines on there and stuff like that. And I found that image actually goes on cave walls. Have you seen that in my videos? I've literally found it in cave walls 40,000 years ago.
No, I haven't seen that, but I'll have to have a look.
Yes.
So sorry, this is the image of the Wheel of Fortune or the 7-sided regular polygon?
So yeah, let's call it a septagon. It's actually called a heptagon, but septagon makes more sense to our English ears. Yeah, that John Michel, you know, that diagram with the Earth and the Moon at the top, and that's derived from a septagon. Yeah. So basically, that John Michel image I found on cave walls 40,000 years ago. It's literally drawing bulls and other things, and like so obvious. The most obvious one I found like that was what's it called? The Nama tablet in pre-dynastic Egypt, and it's just so obviously there. Some things you can see it more easily than others, and because it's such a complex diagram, it's difficult to show people on the internet when they're looking on a phone.
What I got from the videos that I did watch is that you have kind of a very visual way of engaging with the world, and you can see patterns very easily. So do you think that was it? You basically, you could see the structure and the pattern of these symbols in lots of other places where maybe someone else wouldn't see them.
Yes, and also I have Photoshop, so I just slap one over the other, and and that's where it goes. But yes, I'm a visual artist by profession, so that made it easy. Yeah. By the way, who's doing this? Who's doing this interview?
Looks like we switched.
We switched positions.
No, well, I'm always interested in people, in people's backgrounds and histories, and what their inspiration is and motivation. So yeah, I just thought it would be interesting to know where you're coming from. So and how did you end up on the Holy Island?
I severed my Achilles tendon. I had a mythical injury.
So you went to a mythical island to recover?
Yes. It was a strange. Honestly, it was a strange place. It was just circumstance that I'd met a young lady at the time, and I'd actually got the injury, enjoying myself with her in the bath. There was a glass of gin on the side of the bath.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Yeah, I don't know.
And then it spurted everywhere, and there was yes. That's so it was just like, well, I can't really walk anywhere. And she said, do you want to stay here? I'm like, yes, I do. So I did. But things unfolded from there. It was very like the universe put me there. And then when I got back, I'm just following what the universe keeps telling me to do, basically. That's been my life.
That's very wise.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what got you into it?
Well, probably something similar with no injuries along the way, or gin. But basically, I suppose I was into. I've always really been into history and myths and everything, and then I kind of was reading things by Graham Hancock and Jean-Michel, Robin Heath. There are so many books actually that are really interesting, that are really engaging, and that kind of leave you feeling, oh wow, that's amazing. I never knew that. And I guess I just read a few of those and got really into it. And then my version of being housebound is kind of because I'm a mum. And it just means that very often it's a big hassle to get out of the house when you've got small kids. And you are, it's not that you're completely housebound, but you're a little bit housebound, you know. And also I'm not a good sleeper, so I just thought it's a good way to, if I'm awake a little bit in the night, it's a good way to pass the time, because it's actually so interesting that I kind of look forward to waking up. Well, I used to wake up at 3 a.m. and thinking, okay, I'll just kind of have a look on Google Earth and see if I can find some alignments or read a bit more of this book that I'm on. And yeah, so that's how I got into it. And then I started finding things that I thought were really amazing. So I thought, well, I really would like to share some of these. So I started my website, and that's how. And then I at the time as well, at the beginning, I was posting a lot on the Graham Hancock message board. So that was really nice. That was really interesting, because you're sharing your things, but you're also, more than anything, you're reading other people's work and comments, and that was actually a really amazing experience. I actually don't post there so much now, but that was really interesting, and there were some amazing researchers posting there actually.
I'm on there myself, actually. I'm not on the message board, but Graham asked me to publish an article on his website.
I saw that was really interesting, and I watched the video. Yeah. But there was, it's. I mean, to be fair, I mean, like him or lose him, I think I really like him. I like his books, but I love the fact that he's got this website, which is basically people can come to it and exchange information and views, and it's really, like, to his credit, it's a really great thing to have.
Yeah, definitely. I think he's great. I don't always agree with him. Who does always agree with everybody?
Yeah, no, sure. Yeah.
But I think he's just loathed because he's a controversial figure and people like jumping on it. And a lot of people are ill-intentioned, and they're just going after targets. So yeah, I can't see anything he's done wrong. I think he perhaps suffers from a bit of a victim complex sometimes, and doesn't quite get to grips with how academia is actually a nasty, bloody environment. Arena would be a better word.
Yeah, and some of his books read a bit like a kind of a long list of grudges. Like, especially like one. Yeah, the one where he goes underwater a lot. I forget the name of it now.
Yonaguni Island one. Yeah, another one.
I could never finish that one, because I have the audiobook of that as well, and it's his voice, and he's just like on this big rant. It's just a different energy. But anyway, really, really cool, really interesting. Love his work.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that he's spreading it out, and he's a touchstone for people to go and begin this journey with. Yeah, I think he's great.
Yeah. No, I agree.
And Randall, we love Randall. Bit of Randall. Carlson,
right? Randall's great. Love Randall, and he's got some brilliant presentations. He's got a great one on Halloween. I don't know if you saw that, and then Atlantis, and all sorts of other things. Sacred geometry, really, really interesting. With a big, deep voice.
I want him to either be my granddad or Father Christmas. I can't make up my mind. I'm gonna, if I ever meet him, I'll demand he does one of those two.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, what do you have any projects you're currently engaged in that are fascinating you?
Well, I'm basically trying to still understand a lot of the numbers I'm finding. So I kind of, like a lot of people, got sucked into the whole Pyramids of Giza thing, and basically just analyzing the figures that Flinders Petrie put down, in terms of the dimensions and things. And I kind of got sucked into that for the last basically year and a half, 2 years, pretty much. So I've been looking at that, and I'm kind of still on that, but I'm also looking a little bit elsewhere. So basically all my things I put either on my website or on the academia website. So I've basically put out things about myths recently, and a little bit of Giza still, and a little bit about ancient metrology, and a little bit about ancient astronomy. So I keep all these kind of things going, and I'm just trying to learn a bit more about them all. I did one about Khorsabad, which is like an ancient city in what's now Iraq. And I often go back to Plato and have a look at Plato's numbers. So I'm just kind of trying to find links between all of these things. And I got really lost in the Pyramid of Giza dimensions because I started finding a lot of the numbers could be explained by astronomical cycles. So I got really into the numbers and the geometry, and not so much through Jean-Michel. This was more through basically Dennis Payne. He posted on GHMB for ages, and then he's more in academia now. So, and also Jim Wakefield. So Dennis is English, Jim is Australian, and they really got me into all of this in the beginning and to looking at the astronomy behind the numbers. Also, I was
going to say, I just remember the most recent podcast that's been up is with an Australian chap, my friend Dane, who discovered so many crazy things about the alignments of Giza and somewhere in Peru, I think it was, that it's all linked to the years, the cycles of Saturn and Jupiter conjunctions. And like it's all 432s and 1080s, the usual. And it's like, whoa, that literally blew my mind. Like really good stuff.
Well, it'd be interesting to talk to him and see exactly where he's getting those connections, because that I'd say, I mean, this is the gift that keeps on giving. It's just you could always find more stuff, you know. But definitely the astronomy is there. It has to be. And then I was interested in why would you encode all these numbers from cycles, and they're really, really precise and really complicated, and they must have taken centuries and centuries to arrive at. Why would you encode them in a monument when there's no practical use? I mean, when it's the megaliths, I think there is a practical use. I think that you can think about them in terms of analog computers. Not that I would know how to work one, but I think it's definitely possible that they had a practical use. That they were about measuring time and keeping a note of various cycles. But when you go to the Pyramid of Giza, you can't really see why on earth it would be useful for, let's say, the number of days in 80 years to be represented by this particular width, or you know, like even the dimensions of the Earth. Now that's quite well known that the dimensions of the Earth are encoded in the base of the Great Pyramid. But why would you do that? So that's what I've been working on recently, just trying to understand that. And basically I kind of tried to really think about that. In the beginning, I thought maybe it would be like for the same reason that we have gargoyles and all sorts of statues on the top of cathedrals that are looking up to the sky, and it's really just for the divine eye, you know, this eye that's watching over everybody. But then I kind of thought it doesn't really work, because it's not like there are statues looking up at God, or that God is looking down on this particular creation from some kind of celestial viewpoint. It's different. You're encoding numbers that actually are completely invisible. It's only through knowing the numbers that you're looking for and looking at the dimensions and the proportions that you're finding them. So that doesn't really work for this divine eye, you know. So then I thought, well, it has to be something else. So I just kind of thought about it, and I think for me the best explanation is it goes back to an animist worldview, and also a sense of heaven and earth are made from the same stuff.
Yes.
And so, yeah. So this is basically, it was a surprise to me when I got to this view, but then I thought, well, it actually really, really makes sense. And I've been thinking about it just to be sure that it does, but I think it does. And basically, if you think about a lot of the creation myths, in fact, almost all the creation myths all around the world have this theme of the separation of heaven and from earth, from and basically the two of these things from some kind of common substance.
Two waters, etc. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's really, really universal. And when there are universal themes in myths, a lot of people say it's some kind of Jungian archetype. And that is definitely a possibility. But there are so many details in these myths. And I looked at one in particular. For example, many, many cultures have this idea of the eyes of this primordial deity being the sun and the moon. And if you look at various cultures around the world, it's the left eye is one and the right eye is the other. And on almost all the cultures I looked at, now I didn't have access to all the different myths out there about the eyes, but all the ones that I found, in any case, bar one, the sun and the moon are the eyes of this god. and the right eye is the sun, and the left eye is the moon.
left eye is the
And
moon.
the only exception was in Japan, where it was switched with the left and right.
Well, they do even because the goddess is a sun over there. You know, they've switched everything. There are
so
actually
that
lots
happens.
of
Yeah, sometimes there's a whole male-female thing, and then in different languages we have masculine and feminine words for sun and moon as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just saying,
anyway,
in Japan. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Carry on.
No. Well,
I was just saying,
I
literally,
that was an
in lots of.
interesting...
We're going to keep doing this. No, sorry. I was going to say, in
Sorry,
lots
Ryan,
of
you go on.
throughout time, you see lots of polemics going on. So, you know, at one point, the old gods would have been in the Greek culture, the Titans. They would have been the gods at some point, and then the pantheon kind of took over. And you see these constant switches. And just what happened in Japan was that switch had happened to have the female and the male swap. You know, it might be the well, you know, it happens in all cultures. The female and the male swapped, but they just didn't swap back again at some other point. It just stayed that way, and then the West intervened. But yeah, the
very fact that they even in Japan mention left and right, and that there is an eye correspondence with the sun and the moon is already really interesting, whether it's left or right. But the fact that it's left for the moon and right for the sun in so many cultures, and for example in Egypt. But also I found a myth from the Gilbert Islands, and they're the tiny little islands in the Pacific. Left eye is moon, right eye is sun. Yeah. And so when you find these details, I think it will be very much harder to dismiss it as a Jungian archetype of like this need to express, oh, sun and moon, it's two eyes looking at us. When you think of the left eye and the right eye detail, and this is just one example to kind of prove a point, if you like, that I think it's about a shared concept and a history. You know, it's not just that these things come out of like some kind of the way that our brains are wired, you know. And basically the one consequence of that would be that there was at some point some kind of widespread, worldwide perhaps, culture where all of these things were in common, and they're pretty much just as widespread as the phenomenon of the megalith and the megalithic constructions and pyramids. Like all of these things are a worldwide phenomenon. So I don't know, it's just interesting to think that these details in myths, and there are lots and lots of others that you could pick, you know, to illustrate this, they go hand in hand with this. Anyway, so basically just to say, I was trying to kind of like reverse engineer the thought process and try and go back to this idea of why would you want to encode these numbers into pyramids or other monuments when there's no practical order. And by the way, like there are other ways in which numbers are encoded in pyramids and monuments, which like not just in Giza. Like there's this city of Khorsabad I mentioned, the ancient city of Khorsabad. The guy who built the city, his name is Sargon II. He built it at kind of like basically it was his big project in his reign. And in a lot of the tablets that he left behind, he literally says, I built a city and it had this many cubits in the wall perimeter. And that's the first thing he says about it. This is the number of cubits in the wall perimeter. And by the way, this number, and I can't remember the way he puts it, but it's basically this number is my name. So basically, you know, the way there's gematria in a lot of the ancient cultures. So his name, basically, and it's very hard to decode. I don't think anyone really knows how to decode that particular gematria, but his name is basically the number of cubits in the circuit of the wall perimeter of his city. So again, why? So I think it's because
I have something to give you then.
Yeah,
if you this sun and moon stuff, I've been down that rabbit hole before. So this is something that's going in the book, and anybody that's listening to this that isn't Melissa, close your ears. So it is numbers. It's within the 108s, the 432s, the 144s, all those things. It appears that there's a male and a female to the numbers, and if you start to put them into, I'll give you a sheet that I've done after the show. If you put, there's basically a masculine and feminine number, and you put them into the Pythagorean right angle triangle. And then it becomes very obvious why they're doing it this way. Because in Egypt, the one side was Osiris, the other side was Isis. Then Horus is the hypotenuse. So Yes, there's a male and female number within that canon, is what it is, and it's not like John Michel was saying. There's 666 and 1080. It's forget the 666. There's male and female numbers. It's because some of them are multiples of 9 by 3, and other ones are multiples of 9 by 4, is what it is. 3, 4, 5 triangle, and then that is like the base pixel, as it were, the fundamental building block of all this megalithic stuff. Okay, everybody can take things out your ears now. But I'll send you a sheet that proves that.
Okay, because I know the Pythagoreans were interested in that, and 1, 2, and 3 as the very first basic integers were considered as masculine, feminine, and then the marriage of the two. So I guess there's no reason for them to stop at 3.
Well, I don't know how I can't read the mind from that, but my own investigations, it's mathematically, it's just proven essentially. I love Pythagorean number philosophy, by the way. It's one of my favorite areas.
Yeah, no, it's actually really interesting, and Plato as well. So I was saying about the numbers. I'll give you another example. If you look at the height of the Great Pyramid, according to Petrie, it's 5,776 inches. And this number can be arrived at very closely anyway, to within an inch, by taking a yuga, that's the Indian period of time of 4,320,000 years, and usually it's sidereal years in the Indian system. So if you take this period of time, a yuga, and you divide it by a sidereal month expressed in days, so 27.321661, and then again by 10,000, you get this number, 5,775.3, which is basically within an inch of the height of the Great Pyramid as measured by Petrie. And actually, the Indian mathematician and astronomer Aryabhata wrote this in his work. So this is, we're not in prehistory anymore. This is from about 1,500 years ago. He actually, that's where I got the idea from. He actually says, oh, if you take a yuga and you divide it by the number of days in a sidereal month, you get this number. And then I saw the numbers, like, oh my God, that's the height of the Great Pyramid. So that's just another example of why it's really interesting to look at the numbers of in the dimensions of the Great Pyramid and expressed in inches, because and this is something that's been found in Brittany by Robin Heath and Richard Heath, that an inch expresses a day, and this could be for practical purposes or perhaps something more than that, some other purpose. And there are also millions of other interesting numbers. There's divisions by 28, which is the lunar month, but it's also a perfect number. There's the number 8 and 99 lunations and a cycle of Venus, and reconciling also with 8 years. All sorts of really interesting numbers that on their own you could think, well, that's a really an amazing coincidence. But when you take them as a whole, it's just like, you can't dismiss them as coincidence.
It's mind-boggling, That's why I'm not too fussed about getting the numbers right all the time. Close enough is good enough for me, because there are so many of them, and they're applied to so many things, and there's so many. I think a lot of this secret science, as I call it, is getting one number system to talk to the other number system, the one measurement system to talk to the other. And there's I think there's yet some Rosetta Stone to be found that will perfectly. I know people have made headway towards this, Robin being one of them.
Yeah, well, there are different units of measure that you can study, and that's really, really interesting. And there are some really amazing people doing work on that. So that I would know, there's David Kenworthy, Stephen Dale, Jim Allison, so many other people are doing really fantastic work on that. And you can basically see that the units of measure that we have today, the inch, the foot, the mile, they go back to prehistory.
The meter's been found in the pyramids.
Yeah, and the meter. So a lot of people find this idea a bit laughable. There's no way that the inch was used by the Egyptians, or there's no way the meter was used by the Egyptians. But I think you just have to look at the at the data and make your own mind up without brushing it off as ridiculous. You know, have to have a look and see.
Are you aware of Alan Green's work?
Alan Green, no.
So he found all this stuff in Shakespeare. He decoded Shakespeare and found it all in the frontispiece, and then coincidentally found a lot of it in the pyramid, because those two things line up very nicely. And he's discovered that most of these things are based on constants like Euler's number, Euler's number and square root of 3 and you know, the usual derivations of like golden ratio and things like that. So these are actually, we keep looking at out there astronomically, but I think we're finding them out there because they are in these mathematical constants which govern everything.
Yeah. Well, that's definitely one that you can find in the Great Pyramid, Euler's number, and obviously square root of 3, because this number, actually by coincidence, the height again of the Great Pyramid, if you think of it again in inches, the height, it can be interpreted as 10,000 divided by the square root of 3 as a number of inches, and that would be slightly smaller. I just said 5,775.3, but this would take it down to 5,772.73.2. Like, we're in the same ballpark. It's definitely within the imaginary.
No, you're allowed. We've established you're allowed to do that. Plus, also, these ancients were trying to deal with whole numbers, so there's always a little bit of.
I'm not sure about that.
I'm not sure about that either, but as the canon goes, they were trying to deal with whole numbers. The amounts of times I found amazing things, and it's like it's in the decimal, it's in the point afterwards. It's like, how I'm dealing with something 2,000 years old, and like they're doing this maths, they're doing this crazy harmonic maths, and I keep finding things in. I found one the other day that was encoded in a Hebrew Satar square. And it was 2592.02592.0, you know, not point, you know, just carried on into infinity. I'm like, they've done that on purpose. That's a processional year.
Yeah. That's actually really interesting.
Excuse me? Say that again? I'm still there.
No, that's really interesting about, 25920 and then repeating like that.
Yeah. So why else? I mean, they're definitely doing that on purpose. But the decimal point hadn't been invented by the time these guys were doing these Satar squares. So, what do you make from
we
that?
don't know that. I mean, we use Indian mathematics, and where did that come from? You know, Indian culture is ancient, so I don't think we can say that their notation was invented in the year whatever. You know, any more than we can say when the Vedas are from. We can say when certain particular texts were written, but we can't say when the information is from, any more than we can really date stone. There's so much, since like it's very difficult to date some of these things. So maybe they did have the same notation in India like a very, very, very long time ago. And there's an obsession with sticking to Babylonian notation or Egyptian notation, you know, which is all about fractions and base 60 and everything. But maybe that was just one side of the story. We don't know the full story, and I think we can't assume that they were somehow not very smart or that they weren't very sophisticated.
No.
Because look at the pyramids, like that's proof in itself. First of all, they're still standing. The precision with which they're made, and if you don't believe the numbers, for example, the ones we've just been talking about, just look at the precision in the placing of the pyramids in terms of north, south, east, west, and in terms of the margin of error between the dimensions of the four sides of the Great Pyramid, and that really tells you enough. The orientation and the precision of the margin of error between the four sides. After that, you really can't say that they weren't sophisticated. So.
Hey, I ain't saying it.
No. I'm just putting that thought out there. No.
Yeah, please don't take me seriously. So I was about to say, I for one think there's enough evidence out there in these deeper mystery traditions, particularly that prove that they were aware of decimal places.
Okay,
and such. That's interesting.
And such things.
I mean, these guys were the magicians. So a lot of my adventures have taken me off to looking at what magic was and what they were doing. And a lot of people think it's like raising demons and stuff like that. And it's so clearly not these things. They're obsessed with time and the the journey of the life force, as it were, from a timeless place into time where it divides off. You get yin and yang kind of ideas. And then that suddenly becomes these time numbers that we're talking about, 432, 1080, whatever it'll be. This is why it's the serpent knowledge. You always see serpents with these things. And this was the art of the magicians. And the magicians are the same guys building the pyramids and doing, you know, crazy rituals and strange drugs and whatnot. Yeah. So, when
it's funny. I arrived at the idea that there was some kind of magic that was the reason for these numbers being in the walls of Khorsabad or in the dimensions of Giza. I was kind of thinking about the precision of the measurements and how it's bringing the human world in alignment with the divine. And so if you're representing the cosmos symbolically, maybe with a view to keeping harmony in the cosmos, because that's the implication of the fact that the whole cosmos is alive in some sense, not in the same sense that maybe we're alive, but the fact that it's all alive, that it's all one living being. We also have a role to play in keeping the harmony of the rest of the cosmos, because it's a living being. We're just one part of it. This is, I think, the reason why animism is part of this idea of placing these numbers in the dimensions of Giza and other monuments. I'll stick to Giza, but just one.
Yeah, it's the old axiom, as above, so below. That's what they were doing. They say in all the texts, some of the first things they say. And it's always, again, tracing that life force into time and those numbers. It's almost immediate that the life force itself is these numbers. I see it time and time and time again.
But when you say as above, so below, on the one hand, there's a sense of these two aspects are one and the same. On the other hand, there's a sense of division. So maybe the emphasis in that sentence is more about the fact that there's division, that we're mirroring something that's different but similar, you know. And it's a bit like if you read Marx's critique of Feuerbach, it's the one about when he says, you know, he has these 10 points that he makes in terms of Feuerbach, and he's saying that heaven and earth are separate, and this is wrong, and we need to stop this. This is ridiculous. Everything's being duplicated, the duplication of heaven and earth. And so what Marx takes out of that is to say, well, that's enough. The point is we have to change the world, stop talking about heaven and all this. But when you say about the hermetic as above, so below, are we talking about something that's keeping us separated, or are we talking about something that's supposed to be two halves of the same thing? Because I think it's easy to take that as a sense that we're separate.
It's both.
Well, it's both, yeah.
It's both. But it's that there's been, because of time itself. Imagine before time began, everything was one homogeneous, holistic nothingness, where everything happens but nothing happens. There's no motion there. And then as we move into time, we get this serpent symbolism, which is like there's a masculine and feminine, there's a beginning and end, a yin and a yang to it. But then, so therefore for time too, there's a beginning of time and an end of time. And what they're trying to do is reunite the two ends of this serpent together so that it moves back up. But then we'll go through another cycle of it again. So the whole idea is that you, the land, and the universe, the physical universe itself, are all trying to do this reuniting, this Hyros Gamos, this you know, alchemical wedding. And that's what they're trying to achieve.
I've got so many things you could say about that. First of all, to do with alchemy, you have this male female person with two heads standing on a dragon. So very similar to Saint Michael, Archangel Michael, or George standing on a dragon, or sometimes the devil in later centuries. So this is, I think, similar to the idea of taming chaos.
It is.
Now, this could be in terms of chemistry, but just as you said, it's about taming chaos, and the dragon never dies. Like, the devil doesn't die, and it sometimes music. I think it's quite funny in some of the medieval paintings. The dragon actually looks up at Michael and goes, "Seriously, he's still there?" Like, it's quite funny, the look on the face. Like, there's no violence in it. It's just basically two forces that are joined by this sense of opposition. And
Yeah.
so you have that, yes, in the alchemical images, you have that in some of the religious images, and then you can take it back to the constellations of Fucus and Scorpio, which is really interesting then from another point of view, with the stars and the center of the Milky Way being at the foot of a Fucus and all this Antares.
Yeah.
But to go back to what you're saying about time is slowly being formed within this mass, but it's limited. Obviously, there's time on the one hand, and there's eternity on the other hand, and never the twain shall meet. They're completely separate. So you have the Ouroboros going round in cycles. And another aspect for a lot of these ancient cultures was that they all believed in these large cycles of time. Some of them small, some of them it's like the month, the year, etc., etc. And then you go on to these massive cycles, like we mentioned the Yuga just now of 4,320,000 years. And so it's all connected, as just like you say. So again, you have this idea of the serpent or the dragon. So on the one hand, it's Michael, whoever is at the top of this system, where you're kind of trying to tame something that's not in the system. And on the other hand, you have this idea of the dragon being within the system, and it's time going round and round and round.
I think as long as you always recognize that dragon is the life force itself at its base symbology, then everything else will kind of, you can sit there and study it thereafter. But if you get confused as to what it is, because like that you just said, the Rebis and George, that dragon is more like, you completely spot on with the chaos, but that's more like the endocrine system in your own body. It's your own dragon, it's your own chaos, it's your own. And he's, like George is slaying that dragon. They always slay it in the mouth. Now that mouth, your appetites and your endocrine system is what urges on your appetites. It is your urges. So you slay that dragon, and then the masculine feminine alchemical wedding happens thereafter. However, I would like to say about that Rebis, if you look under it, there's a circle, a square, and a triangle. There's a 1, 2, 3, and 4, but the 1 and 2 are hidden. The 1 and 2 suggested me to draw a triangle within that circle and square. And when I drew the triangle in it, the angle of it was the same as the angle of the ecliptic, telling us that it's that 25/9/20 again. Alchemy, as far as I can determine, and I've really studied alchemy, is these mystery traditions, and they're always again and again and again point to that processional cycle, holding those numbers that we were talking about earlier. And I think somehow they're either using that as a proof of God, as it were, or as a basis for all this metrology and all these divine things that we can do with architecture and whatever else.
Because once you know how to make the gold, you don't need it anymore, right?
Well, I think that Ouroboros serpent again, I think you get on the top and then it devours itself again, and you're like, no, we're back down to the bottom. It's it's that devil, like you said, smiling up at Michael, going, "Are you taking the Michael?"
Exactly, literally taking the Mickey. But interesting as well what you're saying about the myths being interpreted in terms of the individual and the rational self. And because for a lot of the 20th century, of course, they were taken up by Freud and Jung and all the other really interesting people doing work on psychoanalysis and the soul. So that's one way of looking at it as well. It's exactly what you say. You're slaying the dragon. It's something to do with ego. But then I think that's kind of disappeared now. I don't think that anyone is seriously even reading Freud and Jung in the psychology context anymore. And that seems to be very much in the past, as are the myths, to be honest. But then another aspect of the slaying the dragon is that in a lot of the myths, so sometimes there's a negative and a positive context. And, when you see Chinese New Year, the dragon is something that you celebrate, but very often in the Nordic European myths, it's something that you have to fight against, and hence fighting the ego, but also the dragon is protecting a treasure that you have to try and get if you're Siegfried or someone like that. So it's there are so many different aspects to the symbolism. But I think that
I would argue actually that's the same. I would argue that's the same thing. It's just looking at it from two different sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
It's all these energy arts that you find in Tai Chi and Qigong and yoga. It's just that's the Western tradition. Because look, your urges are a pain in the backside, and if you keep wasting all your energies on, particularly where we're driven by these things. So you've got to sublimate them and take that energy and use them for something else. And as a practitioner of that stuff, it does work, and that is what it is.
Yeah, like
probably. I mean, I'm not putting a full stop on that. That would be a terrible thing for me to do.
But yeah, like the dragon symbolism is really interesting. Then to go back, then once you've gone through all that and looked at the guarding of the treasure and everything, then to go back to this idea of chaos again, and time and eternity.
Yeah. That's the old Marduk and Tiamat. That's how old that story is. Tiamat's the dragon of chaos from the salt waters below. Marduk's the king of the waters above. These two things coming together.
Yeah.
And
I
think there's an above below. No, sorry, I think there's an above belowness to all these things. It's not like just the body. It's the body plus the cosmos. It's always both of them together, because these are base symbols, if you get me.
And in the case of Tiamat, I think it's a she, is salt water. So it's not necessarily a beast, a dragon with a head. It's something very basic and primordial. And then what's interesting then, if you go back to all these creation myths, and also interestingly about the water, they're all watery. I mean, in the Bible, it's watery as well. And in the Japanese myth, it's not so much killing some kind of primordial beast. Like there's no like violence like in some of the Greek ones. It's basically stirring this big mass, this big substance. But out of all this comes order.
Yes.
That's the crazy thing. Like somehow out of this chaos, out of this mass comes order. And that's the magical thing. I suppose it's basically just to emphasize the fact that you really can't explain it. You can't explain that a tree grows in such and such a way, or that we are in such and such a way. Like you can't explain how this order has come about. And I guess it's trying to make sense of order.
Yeah, well, totally that. Marduk throws a conceptual net over Tiamat to capture it before he stabs it in the mouth and whatnot. Again, stabbing in the mouth, the appetite. But he throws a conceptual net over it. Yeah, and then cuts it up into lots of pieces and makes the world from it. I totally agree. Yes. You can't find the origin of this chaos, really. It's just an order unknown. It's just, there's an implicit order in everything. You just don't necessarily understand it. When Marduk captures that chaos, he's able to examine it, cut it up and make things from it. This is what humanity does. We're explorers by nature, I think.
And this is something again that you get in so many of the creation myths, is this cutting up, this sense of cutting and the division, but the sense there's a lot of violence. There's why I was kind of wondering about that. Why is this violence necessary? But it does seem to be necessary. It's in all the myths, like cutting, and even in one of these in the New Zealand, one of the New Zealand creation myths, they're cutting, and it just the way that they said it was really kind of like almost disturbing. This kind of there are different polarities going on, but there's a lot of this sense of knives, and then you've got Kronos being like castrating his own father, and then
it's that polarity you just mentioned. It's that the symbolism of a knife or a sword or a blade is to divide into two. So it is that polarity thing, the base of the universe. Spot on, love it.
Yeah, and I found in the Gilbert Islands again, where they had the left eye, right eye, there was the cutting was interesting because it wasn't actually done with a knife. It was done by an eel, a great eel called Riki.
Right.
And excuse me. And the eel says, "Heaven is clinging to the underworld," and then the other guy is like, "Just keep cutting." So I think the implication is that the eel is cutting with its teeth, and then gradually the heavens go up and the earth goes down. But still, it's like, even though it's almost as if it's like a pre-age of metal version of the myth. It's basically just teeth, but still that sense of cutting and soaring, and you got Shu as well, the god Shu coming up into the air, and heaven, father, and earth, mother, always this same theme. The offspring separating the parents, which then become heaven and earth. Uranus and Gaia.
That's that for me. That's that life force thing again. And you know, like with Uranus, I mean, I know you know this, but I'm explaining it for the people that are also listening, as engrossed as we are. So with Uranus, Uranus is like infinitude everywhere. Everything's filled up with infinity because there's nothing else to put there. It's filling everything. Then Saturn, so that's a version of the life force. Then Saturn is a different version of that life force, cuts off Uranus in order for the universe to then start to not be. So there's like mortality and immortality. It just means outside time and inside time. That's what it means. So when the gods offer you immortality, it's usually on some drug, and it usually just means time's gone out the window. So is your ego and all these other things. So with Kronos, yes, now infinity has stopped. So what's the opposite of infinity? Well, it's mortality. It's within time now. So
that's brilliant.
off we go.
Yeah. And that in a way leads us back to Plato, because Plato has an idea of the forms being belonging to some kind of world. Basically, there are ideal patterns, if you like, or templates for everything in this world, and they live beyond temporality. They live in some kind of infinite world that's, whether it's real or not, it doesn't matter. Maybe the world of mathematics is also this world that's beyond the mortal tangible world, you know, that has limits, you know. And so you're kind of like trying to correspond back to these things. And then we're back to the numbers again, because some numbers have no end. Like you mentioned the one like 25920, 25920, 25920. That kind of a number doesn't have an end. It keeps on going and going.
Irrational numbers. Yeah.
Then you have the irrationals, pi, square roots of 3 and 5 and all the rest. And these numbers go on, but even without a pattern. So in a sense, through these numbers, you're connecting back to this world that's beyond order and that's beyond time and temporality. That's not how exactly Plato expresses it. He doesn't actually put it like that, but I'm just me suggesting.
No, I think you're spot on. Yeah, that is, when you look into the myths and the mysteries, Pythagoras to Plato, that is what they're saying. That is literally what they're saying. And the whole aim in doing these rituals and the stranger parts of magic, taking the potions or whatever, you're trying to get back up there to that realm of ideals and even beyond it, to these immortal places. You know, the ambrosia takes you beyond time and beyond death. You are you're back there again. And quite frankly, you get downloads when you're up there. Yeah.
And the hallucinogenics are a big part of all the religions. There are mushrooms on the stained windows in Chartres Cathedral. I think that's another part of religion that's maybe gone away. Well, it's definitely gone away. I mean, I don't see people doing magic mushrooms on a Sunday in church these days. Not that I go myself, but I would have heard. I think it's not that. There's a different kind of like understanding about now connecting to this other world, this kind of beyond, you know, or even there are even people bothered about this beyond anymore, at least within the traditions that we have today.
Not in the traditions, but I think it's coming back though amongst the people. It's certainly the kind of people I mix with, not mix with in my personal life, not only but also, but the people that I do podcasts with and similar. We're all partakers once a year or so to make that connection back again.
Yeah. And it's a bit like the Persian tradition as well. You know, they have this idea of the cosmic battle between Ahura Mazda and Angra Mainyu. This basically, Ahura Mazda is the god of light and truth and order, and then Ahura Mainyu is the spirit of chaos and destruction. So again, we got the Archangel Michael and the dragon and all the other things we mentioned, but the sense of the dualistic cosmology, you know, there's the order and then there's the lack of order, conflict and eternal renewal, and the struggle, and this sense of a world that's beyond this. We have order, and then there's a place beyond it. And it's interesting then that this could be a place of perfection, but it could also be a place of something terrible.
Yes, completely agree. And it's that Ouroboros again, that it keeps devouring itself. That's the problem. The universe literally devours itself. So you're going to have to, there's always some kind of a battle, because there's a predator and prey relationship between you and this other thing that you are also. It's such a strange concept, but that is the way of the universe.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's like predator and prey. That's exactly it. And there's, again, when the serpent is eating its own tail in the Ouroboros, it's that sense of, again, like the cutting, like the eel that I mentioned, or that you mentioned, the sword. this sense of cutting, there's a violence in the whole process, and this violence gives us the order. Like, we depend on this violence in order to have the order that we have.
Yeah, I mean, you can go vegan, but you're still going to have to kill plants and the pests of those plants. You know, there's no way. My point is, you can't get beyond it. It's literally impossible. Devouring itself is what type. That's why Saturn. I mean, Saturn is the Ouroboros, but Saturn devours his own children. He devours every minute. Everything that comes into being is devoured by the universe itself, and there is no getting away from it.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. And there's a sense of the world is a body, and that maybe again we're coming back to that sense of the cosmos is a living being, because it's alive, but it can also suffer and it can also be violent. Like, that's one aspect of whether it has an actual body, or we're just talking about some kind of a particular kind of consciousness, I don't know, but definitely that seems to connect the sense of violence and having to kind of break something up in order to get the order.
Yes, that breaking up is essentially analysis. It's examination. It's logic. It's the process of logic. Does this fit? Is it this? Is it that? Okay. Does then that link to this and that? Okay. Yeah. It's cutting. It's dividing. You're literally cutting up the universe as you analyze and logicize.
Yeah, and I guess that's exactly why we're coming back to the numbers now. So when you're cutting up the universe in terms of cycles of time, or in terms of basically any kind of like number that you're kind of getting from the data or from nature, you know, whether it's a proportion like the golden ratio, or just even just numbers of days and cycles, or like, is it the height of a tree or something like that? Like, basically you're breaking it up into this creation that you've made, and it's kind of a similar process. You're creating something different from something you've taken from something that's alive, and then you're placing them into your temple. Let's just call them all temples, whether they're city walls or pyramids or whatever, as if you're protecting them by some kind of spell or charm by including these numbers in them.
So linked, I'm sure you've come across this, but linked to all this is the myth, whether it's true or not, but the myth of this was a high art from a time gone by, whether it was ended by deluge or whatever other method the universe used to get rid of us, but it's been saved. It's something very important that's been saved. If I don't know, what's his name? Is it something Mendelssohn? A friend of Randall Carlson's developed an engine using these angles and numbers. So I tend towards there's some high technology that we've lost, and they have actually, by looking out, you know, a lot of these things you can tell just by looking at the sidereal cycles of Saturn, as my friend Dane did in what I was talking about before. And so this is the god of embodiment in time and space, probably because they went, hang on a minute, if we just look at that one as far as we can see out, we're getting all these numbers from it, as well as Saturn used to be the pole god as well. So when you get that ecliptic going against the pole of the Earth, and the long year, you know, the Platonic year, that has all these numbers in it as well. So I think they're saying, look, this is something fundamental about the universe. That's the god of space and time, Saturn. So pay attention to these things, and you can work this stuff out. Again, I'm adamant it all goes down to that Pythagorean triangle, which I promise I'll send you the little sheet for later.
Yeah, well, they're definitely important in ancient numbers and pyramids and temples generally. You get Pythagorean triangles all over the place. You know,
all over the place.
Stonehenge is one. You know, you have if you look at not so much the actual standing stones, but the Aubrey circle. You know, there's 56 holes all around in a circle, and then there are amongst those 56, there are 4. Well, they're basically 2 standing stones, cessation stones, and then 2 pits where the other station stones would have been, that make up a rectangle, and that rectangle is basically 2 Pythagorean triangles. So it's 5, 12, 13. That's just one example. There are others in Brittany.
So
there's
many,
one on the second pyramid in Giza. It's a 3, 4, 5 triangle. If you take half the base, the height, and then the slope. So
YMCA. I'm
Yeah.
always the same. I'm kind of drawing things on the screen. You know, the Vesica Pisces, and then we got the pyramid. And yeah,
I
you just
use
end up
everything with
like
my
you're
hands.
dancing.
Yeah.
Well, I've only been doing these podcasts for an hour, Melissa. So would you come back and talk to me some more?
Of course, that would be great. Yeah, I really enjoyed it, and really nice to see that you have similar ideas on things, because
It's because
you know,
you're
just to be
right.
able to well, you must be right, you know. Because it's really nice to basically talk about all these things, as you said, it's maybe not in your everyday life beyond these podcasts that you can have a chat about these things, so it's nice to be able
No,
to.
not at all. But it has been, you've been lovely company, and I would genuinely really love to talk to you some more and all this stuff.
Me too.
I'm just finding that,
so thank you, Ryan.
yeah, talking to people over an hour or so is you know, you've only got so much to fit into your week. So and I've got 3 podcasts coming out this week, so I'm trying to ease it back. But I would love to talk to you some more. I'll maybe pick a subject, or I'll now look at your website a bit more thoroughly and pick something out that I think we might be able to talk about, and you can feed my brain some more. But yes.
Oh, I'm sure be great. And same, because I'm really interested to hear what you have come to, like, in terms of your conclusions and your thoughts. So be nice.
Excellent. Well, have you got any final words you'd like to leave people with?
Well, maybe just to say that we should have a look more at the sun and the moon and the stars and nature, and think about how they govern our lives. Oh yeah.
just that little thing. Have
Yeah.
have a try at that. What's your website called? It's
Mercurial Pathways. Mercurialpathways.com.
It's in the bio at the bottom, everybody. I'll put a link to it.
Yeah, and I've just started as well on the YouTube channel. I'm doing some podcasts as well myself. So Ryan, if you're interested, maybe you can do a chat with me about your stuff.
I would love to. Yeah, that'd be great.
Great. All right.
Fantastic. Just so everybody know, there's a podcast that will be out by now, even though it's not been released yet, of a conversation I had with Arwen Spring, who's another YouTuber who does all the energy stuff, all the I don't know if he sings while he's doing it, but he's a fellow Tai Chi practitioner and martial artist and Qigong, Neigong kind of a guy, energy arts. In fact, the episode will be called Energy Arts. Now I've just said it. So look out for that. And this podcast will be released after that, even though we are now in the future of that having been released. So that statement's pointless. Okay, everybody. I'll see you again at some point in the future. Thank you very much, Melissa, for joining me.
And Ryan.
Goodbye for now. Abracadabra. I've got to start getting that as my little catchphrase. Do you have a catchphrase yet?
No, that sounds like a good one. I think I'll just take that one.
You know, no, it's mine. Cool.
Oh, sorry.
All right, everybody. Goodbye properly this time. Goodbye.